Everyone, it's Ross, and today's video is gonna be a live stream. I'm really happy to be doing these live streams for everybody. They're always a lot of fun, and I feel like if I'm not in the mood to make a video, I feel like doing a live stream really pumps me up a little bit and gets me more into serious mode. I don't know, but let's kind of start with this video. For those of us who are going to join in here in just a moment or pretty shortly, we'll kind of catch them up as we go along, I guess. But for those of you guys who are watching and not watching this live, we're going to talk all about quantifying fig data in this video. That's really going to be the talk here, and then we'll do a nice little Q&A at the end. How's it going, Troy? So, to quantify fig data, and the whole reason why I'm doing this year is, well, I have plenty of varieties, as most of you guys know, and I took a nice little visit to Mario's place in Connecticut. Oh, hey everyone, that was quick. But we went to Mario's place in Connecticut this year in October, and I was just blown away by some of the things that he was doing in his yard. The level of professionalism that took place. I don't even think the video that I did talking about it really did his place justice, and all the things that he does. Really, you have to kind of see it for yourself. And I really stole some ideas from him and tried to make that even better. One of the things that he does that I think is so well done is that he uses these tags, and we talked a lot about the plant tags over the past couple weeks. I'm sure some of you guys have been seeing these videos. We basically got some vinyl blinds from Home Depot, real cheap, and then you cut them up into about 3 inches by 3 inches, and you got yourself a nice little vinyl tag that'll last for quite some time. Probably about, I would guess, probably like somewhere between 2 and 7 years. The tag itself. And then what he does is he writes on it with pencil, and believe it or not, the pencil lasts for well over a year. It doesn't smear or anything once it's on there. So basically what he's doing here is he's got 2 tags, and he's got one tag for the name of the variety itself, so that if for whatever reason he loses a tag, he still has that secondary tag attached to the tree. But this other tag here is dedicated to data. And this is kind of what I'm getting to, right? Is that he records all this data on these tags and then brings those in the fall when the season's over and things are going dormant. He brings those tags in and records that data into a spreadsheet. And by the way, for those of you who don't know where to find this spreadsheet that we're going to be looking at, it's in the description. But that's what he does, is that he records all the data, and you can see this is kind of the layout that he uses, right? He's got the name at the top. He's got any notes that he wants to write down or thinks about as he's going along. If any of them have aborted, right? Because if some of them fell off, that's important to know. As well as when the fig actually showed up on the tree, and then when the fig actually became ripe. And then he also tallies them up here and counts the number of figs that he got to eat. And of course, these numbers are not going to be exact, right? You know, you have to really watch this stuff like a hawk. You got to be out there every single day to make this stuff really as accurate as possible. But we can come close, right? He's also have the other side you can write on as well. He has that for brevas, and one of the things he records here is the bud date, so when the tree actually woke up and started growing. And taking that information from him, or taking that idea from him, I decided to do the same thing. Except we're going to take it, I think, a little bit further, and we're going to quantify some things further and come up with a overall rating. And this overall rating is really going to determine what I keep and what I get rid of. And I think I've been able to really, with the help of the fig growing community on our figs, a lot of my friends over there really helped me out and figure out exactly what I wanted to make this actually something other people would even use themselves. In fact, if you guys want to do something like this with me or in sometime down the road, you can do that. Just go to File here and make a copy or import it. Actually, I think you have to make a copy or download it as your own Excel spreadsheet, and you can edit this yourself. I've also been inspired by my friend Jamie, who's in the fig growing community, and Jamie has really taken my spreadsheet. She basically, in her own words, she says she stole it, but I don't care if anyone takes this and uses it for themselves. You know, none of you guys are allowed to edit this, right? But you can make a copy for yourself, and she improved upon it. And I looked at hers recently and I said, wow, I need to make some adjustments to my spreadsheet because I really like what she's doing. And some of the things that she has are, like, as an example, the photos, right? She's got a nice little link here directly to the photo of the fig. This one here is called Albo. You know, same thing here with Azores Dark. You know, here's a whole plate of them. So, you know, there's certain things we can do, and I think I've just been inspired by the both of them, you know, Mario and Jamie, to create this that I'm really going to get into detail right now about. So for those of you guys who are just joining me, we're going to do a Q&A at the end, but for now we're talking about quantifying fig data. So using the tags, we're going to come up with a couple different key points of information, I think. One is when the tree woke up, right? Bud break. That's this column here. Pretty important. The next date, I think, and Mario doesn't keep track of this one, this is the pinch date. So when exactly we pinched off the tip. And then that way we know how many days after we pinched the tree did the main crop form. So we can get a number there. On average, I tell you guys all the time, and all the pinching videos I've talked about, it takes about 90 days, right? But some of these varieties take longer, some of them take shorter, so it'd be nice to know. And here's a good example, right? If one variety, let's say, took 70 days, well then if I knew that for a fact, then I could, let's say, take that extra 20 days, let the tree grow for an extra 20 days, it'll get more nodes, and that way it'll get more fruit, and I'll have about 20 days worth of more fruit, depending on how much it grows. And I can wait that way to pinch it, rather than pinching them all on the same date, right? I can systematically, in a way, pinch different trees on different dates. And in that way, they'll be more productive, right? So we're also going to keep track of the Breba, which is the first date that the Breba shows. I'm probably not going to have many figs that even have Breba, but it's there in case people want to look at this. But again, the date that the main crop shows up as well. And then I want to know what the date of the last main crop was. So the date that I picked the last one. And now that I have the first one and the last one, that creates a nice little window. And I can really get a good idea of how many days this tree actually takes to ripen its entire crop, right? I know how early it is because I know when they first ripened, but I also know when the last one was. So I know really, I have a great idea at this point of how good this variety is in my climate. Now, some other things we're going to look at here is something called hang time. Oh, you know what? Let me go back 1 second. The whole reason for that window, specifically, let me give you guys a good example here. Let's take Black Madeira versus Italian 258, right? So Black Madeira is a late fig, so is Italian 258, but Italian 258 ripens about a week earlier than Black Madeira. But it's only a week, right? That's not that big of a deal. But if I take into account the window, Italian 258 only takes about a month and a half, whereas Black Madeira, that takes 2 months. So not only is it a week later, but it's also 15 days longer for it to ripen its entirety of the crop. So for that reason, Italian 258 is clearly the better choice in my climate, right? So it's making it real easy to compare similar figs to each other and make it a really clear-cut decision. The next thing we're going to quantify is hang time. Hang time we don't talk about all that much, at least in the community, but I like to talk about it a lot in my videos and in my reviews as well. So in the reviews, if something really takes a long time to ripen or a shorter window to ripen, I'll mention that. And that's what I refer to as hang time, which is the amount of days required before you pick it after it starts to swell. So the fig starts to swell, it starts to get ripe, it starts to get soft, change color. That from that point onwards until I pick it, there's a certain number of days that I'll be counting down, and I usually count down in my head. So we'll try to quantify that even more and see if we can record that data as well, so we have an exact number. And what really makes this a bit tricky though is that as the season progresses, things take a lot longer to ripen. So, a fig that I could pick in maybe 4 days would actually take maybe 8 days in October. You know what I mean? So it's a bit tricky, but we are going to try to quantify this. The next category here is not really something we're going to quantify, and I wanted to quantify as much as I could, but I don't think really basing your entire opinion off of data is really the best way to go. I do think we should try to quantify as much as I can, because a lot of this is going to get mixed up, right? There's so many varieties, so many things you can forget. But I should be giving points towards something that I think is unique, that you can't really quantify, or something that is just superior in some way. That's something that stands out. So that's kind of what this category here is going to be all about, is just some sort of extra points that, and I'm not really going to really be able to explain this probably in great detail, at least in the spreadsheet. I'm sure I could probably explain it, if I was talking to you guys, but certain varieties will just, for whatever reason, get some extra points. And that's kind of where we're tying into now. We're getting into average quality. So this is, I think, going to be a big indicator of the overall rating. So when we talk about the overall rating, this is the end right here. This is what we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to a point in which these figs are based off of 1 to 100, and you can kind of give them a percentage if you wanted. Let's say, an 80 is 80%, which will then be based off of flavor, productivity, and average quality. So this is only one part of it, average quality, and here's what average quality will consist of. Earliness, because the earlier a fig is in my climate, the better the quality is on average. It's just a fact. Figs that ripen in August are far superior to figs that ripen in September. I mean, a lot of that is depending on the weather, but we're talking about average, right? We're talking about averages. Hang time. We just talked about that. How long that fig takes to hang before I can pick it. And because it has a longer hang time, as an example, let's give you guys a good example here. LSU Champagne takes about 4 days before I can pick it. That's really short. That's probably one of my shortest. And I'll be happy. I'll be happy with 4 days. I enjoy it at 4 days. There's other figs like Suati, White Triana, that take about 12 days, maybe even 15 days. Some of them, I may even be able to get them to dry on the tree, like Ronde de Bordeaux. There's a whole bunch of different figs that I'm acquiring here that should have that potential, even in some drizzle, right? So we're really looking for a hang time that's a bit shorter, because that's going to lend itself towards a better quality. Because if the fig has to hang for a longer time, there's just a number of things that can get to it in that period of time, right? If you think about it, 4 days versus 15 days, that's a huge amount of time that a bird, an insect, or some kind of critter could get to that fig. So that's going to affect the overall quality. Another thing that's going to affect the overall quality is the rain resistance. So if it's rain resistant, it's going to do really well in my climate, and the quality is going to be much better because it rains here probably, it rains 40 inches a year, probably somewhere between 4 and 6 or 7 inches a month in the summer and the fall. So the hang time can also be counteracted though by the rain resistance, because if the fig is resistant to rain, like Suwadi and like White Triana, then I can actually afford to let it hang longer, and that kind of negates the whole thing, right? That negates that whole purpose. And I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to weight these things. Each of these are going to have their own weight, right? So maybe earliness will be the most important, hang time will be the second most important, etc. I don't exactly know just yet. We kind of need the data first, and then I'm going to play around with it to then come up with decent values for all of this. We're also going to include in the average quality here uniqueness, standout traits, etc. And that will basically give us the average quality. And that was only one piece of the overall quality, okay? So it's getting pretty complicated, to be honest with you. But it's pretty simple to actually make calculations in Excel or in Google Drive. In these spreadsheets, it really is quite simple. And what I think I'll end up doing with, the average quality here and the productivity rating, we'll also put them on like a curve that you would see on an exam, and kind of base them off of, how everybody did against the entire class. You know what I mean? And then kind of rank them in that order. So the next thing I think we should mention now, if we're moving on here, is the amount that I ripened, right? The amount that I ripened is so important. So this is the amount of figs that I actually got to eat, right? I mean, don't you think that should go into the overall rating, right? That's so important. Also the amount spoiled, right? The amount that have fermented, that split, that got mold, that got attacked by SWD, or were just taken away by a critter. And this is probably going to be the least accurate data point of all of the categories here. Out of all of this is probably the most difficult to accurately keep track of. But what we'll do is we'll take the amount ripened, and we're going to tally this up as we go. Every fig that I'm going to eat, I'm just going to tally that up on the on that card, right? On that tag. And then we're going to basically get the productivity rating. And it's essentially the amount ripened minus the amount spoiled in relation to the average. Again, that's going to be on like a nice little curve that you'd see on an exam. The amount left on the tree, that's something I'm not really going to pay too much attention to in terms of the overall rating, but this is, I think, going to be a nice little overall picture for a lot of you guys. So if I have a fig like Black Madeira, that at the end of my season, things are dormant, but there's still probably, 15 figs left on the tree that I can't eat because they're hard and green and inedible, then that's going to be something I think a lot of you guys are going to want to know, right? And including myself. It really does paint a nice little picture. It kind of really reaffirms your original thoughts on whether or not this variety is early enough to fit itself somewhere in your season. So the amount left on the tree is basically, how many of them were there when dormancy showed up. And we've basically we've explained this probably in a much simpler way, guys, that I've just explained in the little notes here in each individual category. Okay, so now moving on, we did the productivity rating. I want to talk about something called Achenes. We talked about this, I think, in the last live stream, for those of you guys who were there for that. These Achenes are quite simple. It's the female part of the fig, and you can't really see them in this particular fig. Why is that? Because this is Col de Dame Noir. And Col de Dame, all the Col de Dames just have very small or even non-existent Achenes. And that really determines the texture of the fig. These little achenes are the female part of the fig. This white thing is really what they look like. I can show you guys another photo of a different fig where they're a bit more obvious. But because the col de dames have almost no achenes present, it really feels like you're just eating jam. It's very gooey, it's very thick. It's a much more pleasant texture, and I want to be able to quantify the texture as good as I can. I know that Pons, if you go to Pons' website here, and we go to the varieties, if you have his book as an example, he's got them up here. Maybe not for this fig. Huh. Let's try again. Let's try something else here. Here we go. Maybe that's something different now that I'm thinking about it. But essentially you can see it kind of here in the fig. Let me give you guys a good example. Is these white little strands that are coming out, like they're almost like connected to the synconium here. And these white little strands really do determine the texture of the fig. There's some other other exterior things that'll happen as well to the texture, like honey or syrup that's also found within the fig. Really gets things a bit more smoother. This fig's probably the best example of what I would consider to be a real meaty texture. So this one, it kind of has larger achenes, more visible. It's more of a mouth feel, right? You'll kind of get the opinion that it seems like there's more fig there than there actually is. So this is what I would describe as a meaty texture, and I kind of want to just quantify this the best I can. And this will really help me determine the flavor rating, because the flavor rating is not just about flavor. I think it's largely based off of flavor, but in any food that we eat, flavor should undoubtedly be accompanied by texture. In terms of figs, they should also be accompanied by the skin. If you don't eat the skin with your figs, then you don't really have to consider this. But I do eat the skin on all of my figs. I think it's really important. I know a lot of you guys in Europe and other countries probably disagree, and always get the question, why are you even eating the skin? Some figs have such a non-existent thin skin that it really doesn't even feel like there is a skin. So, the thinner skins in my mind are definitely something that I would prefer in my climate, as also in terms of taste. But for those of you guys who are in a warmer climate, like California, something that's really dry, that heat can really ferment the interior of the fig. You actually probably want something with a thicker skin. So it's really important, I think, because not only do they really lend themselves to the texture, but the skin also has its own flavor. On some of these figs, I've had bitter skins, which is a bit weird, but if you guys like dark chocolate, right? Dark chocolate's kind of sweet, but it also has that bitterness in it. I've had some figs just like that, where it's not really overly sweet, but it also has that bitterness in the skin that, in my mind, it's not really the best thing, but for those of you guys, it is like a nice little complexity there that some of you may find really attractive. I've also had some skins that taste a bit nutty. Some of them just have their own little unique flavor, and for you to just toss away the skin, I think is a bit of a mistake on certain varieties. So that's kind of what we're going to get to, is a nice little rating here on all the flavor. And we've been ranking the flavor for a couple of years now. We've downgraded the scale, though, to 1 to 5. And I think that really made things make a bit more sense in terms of quantifying this. You may look at a fig that's a 3 out of 5 and think, oh no, that fig's horrible. But in reality, a 3 out of 5 in my mind is actually quite good. I would say a 1 is a decent Breva. A 3 is probably a keeper, like something of pretty good quality. And 4s and 5s I really don't give very often. I maybe have maybe 13 at most varieties that I've given either a 4 or a 5 to. So once we've got all that together, right, and we've quantified this, we have the flavor rating, we have the productivity rating, and we have the average quality. That then gets put into the overall rating. We get a nice little ranking here, somewhere between 1 and 100. You could think of it as a percentage. And a certain percentage of the 1 out of 100 is going to be dedicated to certain things, right? Personally, I think flavor is probably the most important thing to me. But if it, doesn't ripen figs, or the figs aren't really of great quality on average, what am I even having this fig for? You know what I mean? It could be the best tasting thing in the world, like Black Madeira as an example, but it really doesn't produce all that many, right? I need to have a greenhouse, as an example, for Black Madeira in the beginning of my season and at the end of my season. It's just so long to get the entire crop. That for me, it's probably not, it's never going to end up in my collection. Like it's not going to last. It's only here because it's so good, right? And until I find something that's just as good or very close to it, but ripens a lot earlier, and I don't necessarily need a greenhouse for it, what's the point of Black Madeira, right? It disappears just like that. So I do believe that we're going to find some figs that will certainly beat it out in my climate. And just because I'm doing these ratings and all this quantifying in my climate doesn't mean that you have to do it the same exact way in your climate. You may want different things. You may want to quantify different things. You may want to weight things differently, right? You may not even care about how early the fig is. You may not care about rain resistance because it doesn't rain where you live. You know what I mean? So I think this is a nice little template that you guys can come up with and use, and just copy this into your own little thing and come up with this yourself. I really think we ought to be doing this more as a community. You may look at this and think it's a lot of work, but if you're already outside every day looking at your trees, doing a nice little walkabout, observing the figs, this is just part of the learning process, and I think it could really speed that up for a lot of you guys as well. I guess the last little thing here I want to mention is notes, and we've filled in different notes about just about every fig that I kind of want to come to or kind of answer these questions, or if they're not questions, it's a pretty good statement, like, Col de Dom Blanc, it is the best tasting fig I have. It's thick and gooey, jammy texture. That's, so that's, I think, there to help you guys out, as well as remember that kind of thing for myself. If you don't have a spreadsheet like this and you've already got a pretty decently sized collection, I would get a spreadsheet just to keep track of the variety, the source that gave it to you or you bought it from, again, whether or not it's on rootstock, and the size of the container. I think all this is really nice and really important to keep track of, just when making informed decisions. Because I don't know about you guys, but if you're gonna have a collection and you're gonna have hundreds of varieties, whether it's at one time or over the couple years that you've been growing figs, you want to be able to keep track of this stuff and make better decisions. So that's kind of what we're getting at here, and that's why we're going to quantify data. So if anyone has any questions at this point, now's the time, guys. I'm going to do a little short Q&A, and then I'm going to get out of here. I want to thank everyone for joining us for this one. We are not going to do a video tomorrow. This will kind of take place of that for tomorrow. But yeah, this is something I've been really excited about, and I put a lot of thought into this quite recently because it's fun to think about. To be honest with you, it's fun to think about what is the best fig in my collection, right? And I could name them off, right? I could make guesses. I could have high expectations for certain things, but if I really wanted to quantify it and really come up with a formula for what I think is the best fig in my collection, I wouldn't know how to do it unless I really thought about it. You know what I mean? So I think this is just a nice little learning experience that I've just gone through over the last couple weeks, and I really wanted to share it with you guys. So, excuse me. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, now's the time. I also should probably mention that spring's a-coming, and I'm really excited to try some different things this year, not just with the figs, but with other crops as well. And I want to try a different style of filming, and I want to hear some opinions on it real quick. So let me show you guys actually something that you guys may enjoy here. So there's this guy, Ben Falk, and he grows things, of course, but what he does is, here, I'll just show it to you. So he's got the camera on his head. It's mounted to his head, and he has a GoPro. And because he's got a GoPro, it's literally watching everything he does. And he can kind of talk as he works. And I feel like that's one of the biggest problems with my YouTube channel, or something I would really like to improve on, is doing the work as I'm filming it. Like, I really like to get things done quick. You know, I only have so much time. Plus, now I'm doing all this quantifying of these figs, guys. So it's like, you know, I got to make some decisions here as to how much time I can dedicate to certain videos, right? I can't always make every video super long. There's also the issue of how much editing do I want to do? Do I want to do any editing at all? You know, do I want to continue with this video a day, one video a day, every day thing? You know, so I figured this might be a nice little decent way of doing it. And he literally just is here doing something with the tree, whether it's pruning, harvesting, maybe he's doing some chop and drop or fertilizing something, and he's just bringing you along through his little viewpoint as to what he's doing. So I kind of want to hear from you guys if you think this would be something you would want to see, to be honest with you. You know, I think it'd be a pretty cool idea. I like watching this kind of thing, but it's quite shaky, right? I've noticed. You also got to wear this thing on your head, which is kind of annoying. You know, but just moving your head really quickly, I think, can make things pretty shaky. Not that I have the most steady hand, you know, but I don't know. Where are you guys at? I don't hear anyone speaking. Let's see. Stream health. Minor issues. Troy says, yeah, sure. Alright, dude. That's not very convincing. But I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. Robert says, hey, Ross, do you think it's a good idea to put my trees out in the sun for a few hours on nice days like today? Well, Robert, what trees are you talking about? You're talking about figs? Because if you're talking about figs, then, you know, and they're dormant, right? You also need to tell me where you live. So there's a lot of questions. I can't really answer that question until you give me the full picture. But tell me where you live and what kind of tree you're talking about. Okay, so Troy said that's what my wife said. Yeah, I don't know. If people are not really ecstatic over it, and you said, Mistretta said, if the cam isn't expensive, mix it up. Yeah, I mean, GoPros are pretty expensive, but, you know, there's a couple things, a couple big purchases I want to get in the summer. I'd like to get a nice bike. And I think if I want to do something else, it would probably be the camera. We just got a really nice camera. A DSLR. And this thing is beautiful. I love it. I love filming with it. It's great. But, you know, I can't put it on my head. And you can only do certain things with it. So... Elegant Noir says, hello from Arizona. Hello. Okay, so UCLA says, hey Ross, if it's still cold outside, can you still up-pot your cuttings inside or wait till spring? I mean, you can up-pot your figs anytime you want, you know? You just got to make sure that they're well-rooted. If they're not well-rooted, then... you're doing it too early. You're gonna have transplant shock. They're not gonna like it. You know. Also, if they're inside, that's more weight for you to carry outside. You know what I mean? I think there's gonna be very little benefit to up-potting things inside. For the most part, if you up-pot it, it's probably gonna be set back. And the trees in the indoors don't really grow all that well to begin with, so you know the benefit's very little. Yeah, there's not enough heat, exactly. So it's just like, yeah, you up-pot it, but is there really enough heat for it to really, really grow? Probably not. It's just not. It's not worth it to me. Plus, you can run into other problems, you know. Yeah, I mean, it really does make a whole lot of sense, doesn't it, Troy? I just think that I don't have anyone filming me, right? Like some YouTubers that do this, I don't know how they even do it either. If they don't have anyone filming, like there's somebody who's, you know, a vlogger and they got the thing pointed at their face all the time. It's like, how do they do this and do something else? It just doesn't make sense. So it's also a lot of editing, right? So like if I'm fiddling around with this thing and I'm doing something like, you know, to show you guys something interesting and I keep putting you guys down, or I have to do this, do that, I have to go back and edit that video, you know, and I don't always want to have to do that with all my videos. You know, I think there's certain videos I should edit, really make them as presentable as I can to really get the point across, but others, like, you know, like this one, I'm just sitting here, you know, I don't need to necessarily edit this whole thing. Yeah, the neighbors are gonna think I'm nuts. I mean, they probably already do to some extent, right? But I don't really care what people think about me, because if I did, I probably wouldn't have a YouTube channel where I talk about figs. Right? I wouldn't talk about my fig obsession all the time. Robert says, figs in Connecticut. Yes, they're dormant, but the spring is coming, maybe early this year, thinking they'll start. Okay, well, if you want to get a nice little early start to the season, you can definitely bring them outside when temperatures are above 32. That's called the fig shuffle. We're actually going to talk about this in about 15 days. I'm actually going to be moving all of my trees out from underneath the sunroom onto the patio. Sometime around March 1st to March 15th, I'm going to be doing that. And what that's going to do, the figs are not going to take any damage. They're going to sit there. They're not going to wake up, is what I was told. This is what I was told by Mario. I think he actually brought them out sometime in February, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe it was March. I'm not sure. But essentially, he brings them out when temperatures are pretty much guaranteed to be above 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Because about 17 or below, they'll start to take damage. So you can bring them out when things are, really getting much warmer outside. And as the season progresses and finally we get to our last frost, they actually will wake up just in time for the growing season to begin. And as Mario puts it, it's a much more, I don't even know how to say it exactly, but they wake up much more naturally than if you were to, let's say your last frost had happened and then put them outside. It's not as like an easy of a transition, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Some of them take forever to wake up for whatever reason. They just take 20 years. And if you put them outside, it seems like they rehydrate, right? Because all that rain is going to hit them over about a month and a half. And they gradually wake up with the temperatures and act like a normal tree. It just seems more natural. The fig is also one of the things that wakes up last, so you can kind of afford to do that. And we're going to really get into this, I think, in more detail when I actually do it myself. We'll do a video on it. But you can do this, Robert, you can do this anytime you want. Like, it's called the fig shuffle. People do this all the time. They're crazy with this. Is that they bring them outside of their garage or open the garage door, give them a nice little, warm air during the day and close it at night. It's up to you and how much effort you're willing to put into this. You can also do this in your house. You can bring one in your house, wake it up in a window, and give it some extra light during the day. And then when it gets, your last frost, bring it outside, and the thing has a real nice start to the season. Okay, so Tarek says, what are your thoughts on Craven's Craving and Colonel Lippmann's Black Cross? Well, Colonel Lippmann's Black Cross, I think, is going to be the Black Madeira replacement. It tastes just like Black Madeira, but it's mid-season. It's not very late. It's probably earlier than Italian 258. I would say maybe about a week or two. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping maybe 2 weeks earlier than Italian 258. But the kicker here is that it's rain resistant. And the fact that it's split resistant and rain resistant makes it a far superior choice to any of the Black Madeira lookalikes. Italian 258, Craven's Craven, Violetta, Figo Preto, Black Madeira KK. There's so many of them here that have cropped up over time. Black Tuscan, even Maltese Beauty, you could kind of consider one. Madeira Island Black, Genovese Nero AF. There's so many of them, and they're all the same, basically. The whole goal with these, just like any of the Hardy Chicago types or any of the Violette de Bordeaux types, find one that you really like that does well in your climate and just stick with that, okay? But for my climate, the one that's going to be superior is the earliest one and the one that has the most rain resistance, which I believe to be Colonel Lippmann's Black Cross. Craven's Cravings, I haven't wasted my time on it. There's a lot of hype around it. I don't really believe the people that are growing it. You know what I mean? If I had a really good friend that were to tell me that I really trusted their opinion, and they were to say, Ross, I really like Craven's Craving, you should get it, then I would say, okay, well, let's look into it. You know what I mean? But I don't have anyone like that, I guess is really what I'm trying to say about it. Okay, Elegant Noir says, Ross, I want to grow a tree or trees in terracotta pots, but it's so hot in Arizona that I'm afraid that I won't be able to keep the trees alive. Yeah, probably not. Well, doesn't terracotta hold more water? What I would do is get yourself plastic, but make sure it's white. And if you're growing any kind of potted plant in Arizona, California, Texas, Louisiana, Florida, it's got to be white, because it's not gonna absorb as much sunlight, as much heat, and it's not gonna warm up as much. Figs just will stop growing when temperatures at the root zone are above like 90, 95, somewhere around there. They will stop growing in my summer. So if my figs will stop growing here in my summer in Pennsylvania, you bet they're not going to grow in Arizona. And that's when temperatures are really, again, very warm. So what I do is I put tons of mulch on the top. I do use black pots, but if it were to get so hot that the trees just stopped growing for whatever reason, the mulch has completely solved it for me, because that really cools down the root systems. But if it really became a problem, I would also think about putting tin foil around the outside of the pot and really reflect that sunlight. Alex says, USTA Kingpin, love the channel, keep it up. I don't know what that means, but I am in the USTA, so I guess that's what you're referring to. Thank you, buddy. All right, guys. So if we have any more questions, now's the time. Otherwise, we're gonna wrap this one up. Oh, there we go. Okay, Shrive said, Ross, what's your take on putting a hardened up fig pop cutting directly into the ground? I want to skip the whole uppotting process as much as possible and go straight into the ground after good roots form. Well, Shrive, I think it really is going to depend on where the fig pops are. So if you're starting the fig pops outside and the cutting is already really well adjusted to the outside. Okay, you said hardened, so I guess that means that they're well adjusted to the humidity, the sunlight, the heat. They're all ready to go. I would say go for it. What I would consider the most is that make sure your tree is real healthy, and make sure you know it's real healthy, because if the tree is actively putting out growth, that's when you know your tree is really healthy and it's in a good state. If it's not putting out lots of growth, I would probably consider not doing that and just waiting for it to get a little bit more nutrients, a bit more growth going there. I don't know. That's a bit tricky, really. It's gonna be hard to pull off, because if you don't have the right soil moisture inside the fig pop, you're going to be kind of screwed. And the moisture in there only lasts for so long. So you may want to consider, you're going to have to do it outside, but I would undoubtedly, I think, keep the fig pops, at least the soil, in complete shade. So if you can figure out some way to, like, I don't know, cover the soil but not the top, I think that's your best bet. And then if it gets to a certain point where it's hardened off, it's growing really well, you could transplant that in. Make sure the soil is warm as well. If the soil is not at least like 65, 70, don't do it. Elegant Noir says, are there any varieties that are a bit more resilient? I know figs will grow here in the grounds, but I definitely want to give them a try, probably in part sun or shade of my patio. Yeah, they grow really well in the ground in Arizona. They're so drought tolerant, and they can handle the full sun there. I don't really know of some that are, I guess, more resilient. That's not something I can really easily measure, because I'm not trying to kill them all the time. You know what I mean? I would say Hardy Chicago probably is it's probably one of the toughest figs, though. Yeah, I think that's probably the toughest one, I guess, maybe. But yeah, I don't know. That's sorry, I couldn't help there. Hey, Shrive, no problem. Wrap them with newspaper. Start exposing them slowly to the outside conditions. Yeah. Yeah, good luck with it. I hope you the best. I'm actually going to be starting a few more in about a week. So, you know, it is what it is, but you still have plenty of time if you wanted to do this indoors. One other thing I'm considering, and I said I wasn't going to do this, but I have a whole bin of cuttings that are really well rooted and are growing quite well. I think I'm going to take them out of the closet and put them somewhere else in the house. Maybe I'll put them in a window. Maybe I'll give them some light here in the basement where I'm at and just stick them on the floor somewhere, just so I can start a few more extra cuttings. And this is a bit crazy because I've already got 150 of them right now. But what's another 32, right? So, anyway, guys, I think that's all we'll do for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining me in the live stream. I really want you guys to join in with me on this quantifying thing here. So if you guys want to do this with me, you know, that's really cool. And this is a nice little starting point. And I think this is a nice way for us to really compare, you know, one variety between my climate and, let's say, somebody else's. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this little live stream we did here. I hope this was informative and helped you guys out in any way. This is really something that I'm like obsessed over in the last couple weeks. So, all right, guys, take care and be good out there. All right, talk to you all later.